As they were walking along the road, a man said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." He said to another man, "Follow me." But he replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Still another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family." Jesus replied, "No one who puts the hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God." And so, okay, so that's the passage we're going to be looking at today. And so, just a quick overview, I guess, of this passage. It's just about Jesus and his disciples just traveling along a road, and Luke highlights three interactions with us, and we're going to look at the three interactions and what we can learn from these three interactions, and specifically what type of pitfalls that followers of Jesus may experience, or will experience, or are experiencing, will continue to experience, all the tenses, passive, progressive, whatever. Okay, so let's take a look at the first interaction in verse 57. Yeah, verse 57. And so this man comes up to Jesus and says, "What? I will follow you wherever you go." And if we look at this statement by itself, it looks like a really awesome statement of faith, right? He's saying, "Jesus, I want to follow you." Hooray, hurrah, hallelujah, right? And so, but was that Jesus' reaction? Not really. That wasn't really his reaction. And if we think about Jesus' reaction to this man, it was kind of strange. Rather than saying, "Yeah, sure, come follow me," or like, "They're kind of a little weird, don't follow me," something along those lines, he just says like a random sentence from a random sentence. So Jesus replies with, "Foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." What a strange response. I think if I went to Jesus and said, I will follow you wherever you go," and Jesus said this to me, I'd be like, "Okay, like, so yeah, okay, like, sure, Jesus." But I think we have to look at why Jesus said this, and look at the man to understand why Jesus said it this way. And so, if we look at the previous chapters in the book of Luke, we see Jesus doing all these miracles. He's raising people from the dead, healing people, casting out demons. He fed the 5,000. And so, this man most likely heard what Jesus was doing. He heard, or maybe even witnessed Jesus healing people. And so he was thinking like, "Oh, how awesome would it be to follow a man like this, doing all these awesome things?" And so I think we would have similar situations. If we see like a celebrity or an NBA player or something, we want to follow them, right? Like, "Oh, this guy's so awesome, I want to follow him," right? And that was kind of his reaction. That was his reaction, his heart. And so it's very emotional, like, I'm going to follow this guy. But the reality is that there's a cost to following Jesus. There's a cost. And so what this man was thinking was a very idealistic situation of following Jesus. He was thinking, "Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be a party. There's going to be we're going to be frolicking in the fields or something." And so he was very excited. He was very excited. And he didn't really think about the cost. He didn't count the cost. In John 15:20 it says, Jesus says, "A slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." So the reality is that there are going to be times of trouble. There's going to be when things get rough. And Jesus is telling this guy straight up, he's not going to sugarcoat it. He's saying things are going to be tough. Things aren't going to be a walk in the park. And people will look down upon you for your beliefs and whatnot. And so will you still be able to follow through? And so with this statement, I think he's asking this man more of a question rather than just a response. He's asking, or he's saying is, animals have places to sleep, but I, myself, even though I'm the Son of God, I don't have a place to call home. I don't have a shelter. I don't have these comforts. And so he's telling this man, "Are you willing to follow me even though when times get rough, when things aren't going well, when it's hard to follow Jesus?" And I think a good example we can think of is, so this past year I was in Vietnam, and so I got to see several Christian brothers and sisters just living in Vietnam, right? And so, how many of you guys think it's easy being a Christian in Vietnam, like compared to here? Who thinks it's easier to be a Christian in Vietnam? Or who thinks it's harder? Let's put it that way. Who thinks it's harder? Okay, it's harder to be a Christian in Vietnam. It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to be a Christian. Why? Because if you start going to church, the police start monitoring you. They start monitoring you. They ask you, instead of asking you directly, they get your family to pressure you to stop going to church. And this is kind of just like the baseline, right? If you start doing more like outreach type stuff, it kind of escalates up. But just going to church, this is what happens. And so it's not really comfortable to be a Christian, right? It's more uncomfortable to be a Christian in Vietnam than it is to be a Christian. And so, if it's more uncomfortable to be a Christian, why would you remain a Christian in this type of country? And I think it's because they really counted the cost of following after Christ. Even though it's not comfortable to follow after him, even though they'll get pressure from their family, from government, police, they counted the cost and said, Jesus is worth it. It is worth it on the final day to witness his glory up in heaven, right? And I'm willing to sacrifice my home comfort to follow after Christ. And I think that's something we kind of take for granted in the U.S. I mean, we do have persecution of sorts. Usually comes from like peers and not really on a governmental level. But it's more comfortable to be here. And so we don't really get pressed to really be certain of our faith in terms of, I'm a Christian, and through times of trials. And that's like, I guess, an external way we're uncomfortable, but there's more than one ways we can be uncomfortable. One could come from the inside. And so what I mean is, Jesus, when we're following Jesus, he asks us to do things that aren't necessarily comfortable, right? We have our own comfort zone that we like to do, what we like to do, what we don't like to do, and so if we can, we like to just stay in our comfort zone. We don't like to extend ourselves beyond it, right? But following Jesus, we need to obey him, and that takes sacrifice, and that means that we have to step out of our comfort zone and our way of doing things. And so that's not comfortable. And another way to not be comfortable is, sometimes we are called to tell others about Jesus. Not sometimes, we are called. And that's sometimes scary too, asking our friends about, Jesus or whatnot. Or maybe it's, how we're living our lives. The Holy Spirit is the teacher that we have, right, as believers, and it's convicting our hearts in certain areas that is not pleasing to the Lord, right? And he's asking us to give that up. And so there's a lot of ways that it's uncomfortable. And to follow Jesus, it takes sacrifice. So earlier in this chapter, Luke 9:23, Jesus says, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." And so Jesus says we must deny ourselves, speaking as a whole, and take up his cross and follow. And so what does it mean to deny ourselves? What Jesus is saying is we have a sinful nature. And Jesus is asking us that we need to deny our sinful nature, right? Doing things that are not pleasing to God, and whatever it may be. And he's asking to deny that and pick up the cross, right? Follow Jesus' example and continue to follow after him daily. It's a daily thing we have to do, a daily reminder. Every morning that we have to do. We have to, give our lives to the Lord. And so I guess some questions to consider, just looking at this first man is, do we like to be stretched beyond our boundaries? And if not, then, or do we just stay in our comfort zones? Especially when Jesus asks us to step out. Whether it's, talking to other people, or maybe going on missions, or maybe even if we're thinking long term, like a vocation that, you don't necessarily want to do, but Jesus is calling you to do. If Jesus calls us to come out of our comfort zone, or if we're being persecuted, we'll be able to stand firm in the faith. And so I think that's the first thing we can learn from this question that Jesus poses in the form of a sentence. And so, as the story progresses, he invites someone to follow him, right? In verses 59, he says, "Follow me." And this is a general invitation, not only to this man, but a general invitation that we all have. We all have, Jesus is calling all of us, follow me, follow me. And so the door is always open for us. And I want to make it clear that the invitation is always open. No matter how far, how good we think we are, or how bad we think we are, the invitation is open for all, right? We can't run away from God. We can't hide from God, no matter where we go. Even if we go to the depths, when we're in heaven, where he's there, depths of Sheol, as it says in Psalm 139. We can't run from God. And so that's the first thing we need to recognize, okay? That the invitation is always open for all. Second thing is that, let's look at the man's response. He says, Lord, first let me bury my father. And this seems like a very noble response, right? He's saying, oh, like, let me take care of my father in his later years and wait for him to pass away, and then I'll bury him, then I'll follow you, right? And so this seems like a noble thing to say, right? If I heard this, I'm like, oh wow, this guy's being very honorable by honoring his mother and father. But Jesus gives a very different type of reply. He says, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And so what Jesus is saying is, he's not talking about the physically dead. He's not talking about like have zombies bury people who die, right? He's not talking about like that form. He's talking about the spiritually dead, the people who are dead in their sins, right? Those who do not know him. And so he's saying, let the people of the world take care of their own, but if you're following me, your task is to go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And so what we see is, this man is not really saying this to be honorable, but rather he's saying this to give more of an excuse not to follow Jesus. He's saying, Lord, I'll do it when it's comfortable or when it's convenient for me. And so the second type of pitfall that we kind of can fall into is like the convenience follower. We only follow when it's convenient, when it's in our best interest, or if it fits into our schedule to follow him. And so I think we may be tempted to think, if Jesus asked me to follow him, it's like, of course I would say yes. Of course I would say yes. I wouldn't say no to his face. And I don't think any of us would say that out loud in terms of saying, oh, no, Jesus. We wouldn't say that to his face. But I think if we look at our actions on our daily lives, it speaks a different picture. It paints a different picture. And the sad reality is that we all make excuses, including me. I make excuses, sometimes on certain days not to obey God. And so I think for me, the biggest example I can think of is in terms of saying, I'll follow you later, Lord, this was when I was a junior and senior in high school, so around some of your guys' age. I was thinking, God, I'll follow you, but, so this is kind of like what he's saying, Lord, I will follow you, but let me do this first. So this is my let me do this first. I said, let me go to college first, and then let me graduate, and then let me find a job, and then do my own things with my life, and then after I retire and make money, then I'll serve you, do missions, go overseas, whatever you want me to do. And so that was kind of my response, to Jesus at first. Lord, so I think I fit into this category pretty well. I was saying, Lord, I will, but let me do my stuff first. And so I kind of want you guys to think about what excuses do we make in our daily lives, not to follow after God in the day's tasks that God has placed in our lives. So right now, what are you guys? What's your guys' job? To learn, right? You guys are students. I'm a student too, actually. But and as a student, I firmly believe that we should be studying diligently. But I want you guys to think, like, do you put your studies? I mean, I know some of you guys don't study that much, and some of you guys study way more. But just in general, do you guys put studying above God? And what I mean by this is, I think one of the main excuses that we all have is, I'm too busy. And so what I mean is, Lord, today I'm too busy to, read my word, even just for 5 minutes. Lord, I'm too busy to pray. Lord, I'm too busy to do this. Lord, I'm too busy to do that, right? And I think that's a very common excuse that we all have, including myself. But I'll give you guys an example. If we have a friend that we really like to hang out with, and even if our busy is kind of looking busy, we'll try to rearrange our schedule so we can still hang out with that person, right? So that's what we do, right? In the same way, Jesus is our friend, right? He wants to have a relationship with us, and it really depends on where we have our priorities. If we don't really value our friend, let's say it's just like an acquaintance that we don't really know, and we're really busy, we'll just probably say, oh, like, I'm too busy this week, I can't hang out with you. But if our friend was one of the most valuable things to us, we would change our schedule to accommodate and to meet up with him, whether it's just, physically hanging out, or maybe just having this, Skype call. I don't know if you guys still use Skype, or just playing games together or something. You would make time, no matter how hard it is, to spend time with that person, right? And In the same way, do we make time for Jesus in our daily routine, or do we say, or is he just more of an afterthought? Like, if I have time, I'll read my Bible, meditate, pray, and do all that stuff. And so I think it's not really a question or it's more of a question of where are our priorities. Do we put, I think for a lot of guys who play games, do we put games above, spending time with God? Or, sorry, I can't really think of a good example for girls because I can't really think of it. I'm sorry. Anyways, what do we put above? What do we put above our priorities when it comes to Jesus? Or maybe some of you guys, your priority is Jesus, and you guys take time out in your day to really spend time reading the Word. And it's hard, it's difficult, especially in the beginning when it seems more like a habit and a chore, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And this is something I have to remind myself to do every single day, every single morning. Even if I'm tired, I was studying late, and I'm like, Lord, I'm so tired, I stayed up studying, just let me not do it today. But then I have to remember, if I really value this relationship with Jesus, I should take my commitment to him seriously. And so, and sometimes I fail, to be honest, but more often than not, that reminds me, okay, I need to take my commitment seriously. And so, yeah, this is the second pitfall that Jesus was addressing. So he's saying, follow me, but a lot of us, I think, we have this kind of excuse, I'm too busy, let me do these things first. My personal life, even though we might not phrase it that way, we say, my personal life first, and then I'll follow you. And so finally, let's take a look at this third person. Finally, this third guy comes up to Jesus and says, I will follow you. So like the first guy, he says, I will follow you, but after I say goodbye to my family. And so the last part is kind of like the second one. And so he has kind of the problems of the first guy and the second guy. But on top of that, he has another problem. He's distracted. So if we look at verse 62, it says, no one who puts a hand on the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. So what does that mean? What does that mean? If we put the hand on the plow and we look back, what does that mean? So to illustrate, I'm not a farmer, you guys aren't farmers, so I have to look this up, okay? So when we have a plow, we need to make sure we're looking straight at a distance, right? To make sure we're making our fields straight for crops, right? If we're like, oh yeah, and then we go off and it's this way and do the field completely wrong, you can't just fix that one line and the rest of the field would be okay. You have to redo everything, because if this one line is here, then all your lines for your plants are going to be crooked, okay? And so, to think of more of a modern example, I guess, is if we're driving and we're focusing on the road, we can drive straight. But if we're getting distracted by talking to our friends or on our phones or just looking back, then we're going to be swerving, we're going to get in an accident, okay? That's a more modern example that I thought of, okay? And so this guy's distracted on top of making an excuse and, maybe not necessarily being comfortable. And he's not fully invested in what God has called him to do. And so what Jesus is saying is basically, if you're going to say you're going to commit to the work of God, don't do it half-heartedly. Fully commit with mind, body, and soul. He's not saying, he's telling this guy, if you're going to be serious about following after me, don't do it half-heartedly. I want your full commitment. Not just your physical actions, but also in your thinking as well as your heart. And like Matthew was talking about last week when it came to Martha and Mary, which one are we? Are we the distracted person frantically trying to serve but not fully present? Or are we at Jesus' feet, being fully present with Jesus while he's there? And so when we follow Christ, Christ expects us to follow him with mind, body, and soul. And he doesn't want people to follow him half-heartedly. And I think also looking at these responses that Jesus gives, he's not really interested in having massive amounts of followers, because a lot of these responses they're kind of off-putting. You're saying, Jesus, if I want to follow you, I have to deny myself and not do things that I want to do. And that's, I guess I can go more to that, but that's a topic for later. So he kind of says things to, these challenging questions. And it's because he doesn't want to gain followers for the sake of just having these massive amounts of numbers. And so please hear me correctly. I'm not saying he doesn't want us to follow him. I'm saying he wants us to follow him, but he doesn't want just large amounts of people. He wants our heart attitude to be correct towards following after Christ. And I think that's really important to think of. Because if we think what happens later on in Jesus' life. He's entering Jerusalem. All these people are like, oh, Hosanna, Hosanna, welcome Jesus, right? He's coming to save us. And then a couple days later, what are they saying? Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And so it's not about the numbers, but it's really about the heart attitude if we stick around. And I know it's difficult to do. And even some of the greatest disciples, Peter says, these guys might deny you, but I'll never deny you. But what does he do? He denies him 3 times, right? And so it's hard. Even for the disciples, it's something that they struggled with, right? But I think that gives us hope that they struggle too, because we can think of them as these awesome role models or whatnot, but they have their own flaws too, and we have our own flaws, right? And so it's difficult to do, and it takes a lot of practice and work. But most importantly, it's the Holy Spirit that's guiding us, right? As followers of Jesus, as believers in Jesus, we have a teacher to help us and guide us. And so also another thing to consider is our walk with Jesus isn't just, oh, here's our life beforehand, and then this is the point where we meet Jesus. It's like, whoop! It's not just a straight line up. It's more like, I'm sure you guys know from personal experience, it's more like down, up, like going crazy, back and forth, right? But then if we average it out, the general trend should be an upward trajectory, right? And so even though we have ups and downs, that shouldn't question, am I following Jesus or not? It should be, we have to kind of look from a holistic perspective. And so it's hard. And so why should we kind of follow after Jesus? And why? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And so yeah, it's difficult to do this, right? And it's not difficult to not make excuses. It's difficult to get distracted by things that are in our immediate surroundings, not put Jesus first, and just doing everything that we have, or focusing on things around us. And so I think, like Jesus says here, is when we're farming, when we're plowing, we have to look at a fixed point in the distance, right, to keep a straight line. And that fixed point, while in farming it might be like a rock or something, our fixed point should be Jesus, right? We should be keeping our eyes focused on Jesus and fully commit to His work, right? And so I would challenge you guys today to really consider, what am I being distracted by in my daily life that I've put higher than Jesus, and where is my focal point of my life? Is it on something else that causes me to veer off to the right, left, or is it focused on Jesus? And so that would be my challenge to you guys as we end today and just discuss in small groups today. So, yeah. And the reason I guess my heart behind preaching this was because I really want you guys to have an intimate relationship with Jesus, not just something that you come to Sunday on, but really have a personal relationship with Jesus, because Jesus is here for us, and He's our friend, right? And we need to cultivate it. And so I want you guys to ask these questions to yourself and really reflect and see if you have any questions you guys can ask yourself. All right, so I'll pray for us.